Our next section is Project Stakeholder Management. This is Chapter 13 in the PMBOK. That it was a late add. It was not in the 4th edition. It was added in the 5th edition, and so they put it at the back. But it is a very valuable, important part of how we manage projects. I can't tell you how important and how glad I was when this was included as its own knowledge area in the 5th version. So here we have 4 different processes that we have. Identify stakeholders, plan stakeholder management, manage stakeholder engagement, control stakeholder engagement. So it makes good sense. It's a very straightforward set of processes that we're looking at here. So the first one, identify stakeholders. For inputs, we have the project charter. Procurement documents. We haven't talked much about procurement yet. We have a whole knowledge area on procurement. But here we're looking at procurement documents as they may throw light on who are the stakeholders, who is affected by the project, who affects the project. So it's a good input in this case. We have the enterprise environmental factors, organizational process assets. So those are inputs in identifying the stakeholders. The tools we use is our stakeholder analysis, and we'll talk about that. We also have our expert judgment, meetings, and from this we get a stakeholder register. This is a little more than just a list of names. And we'll talk a little bit about stakeholder registers and how they can be used, templates and such that you can find on this as well. So identifying stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? Consider. Who receives the project output? Who's the customer? That's one parameter of figuring out the stakeholders. Who provides the input? Who do you need things from for this project to flow? Who has oversight? Somebody is in charge of the application you're developing or oversees the department in which this project is being done, then those who have oversight are legitimately stakeholders into the effort. Who has other related responsibilities? If you're doing something, who has a relationship and a related type responsibility to what you're doing? They may be important to either helping you with the project, or they may have ideas about the project, or they may have ideas of things that you can avoid. I mean, there's lots of information that if we just ask questions, we can find, and stakeholders are very valuable in that. Who reaps the rewards? Think about this. You know, a lot of our projects we're doing things, we're bringing products and services, but who gets the attaboys at the end? We need to keep them in mind too, people who get the rewards from the project. Is it the sales staff? Is it the developers? Is it some customer? Is it a VP who got a raise? Keep in mind on who gets rewarded, because it's a good thing to know, and it's a good thing to keep in your stakeholder register of who's going to be rewarded for this, because they may be necessary to help with problems that come up. You know, if they're getting something good at the end, why can't they help it during the beginning? They probably are, but this framing of this question this way helps you focus on that, you know, who is rewarded and how important that can be to know. Who suffers the penalties? Likewise, if you know who's rewarded, who loses the job? Who gets changed from departments? Is somebody being replaced with technology? So if there's things that will adversely affect, those need to be taken into account, just like the things that are positive. So both sides. And here's my general way of looking at it. Anyone who participates in the project and is affected by its results is a stakeholder. And stakeholders are being valued more now than they were at one time. They were almost a necessary evil in some people's worlds. Project management now relies on stakeholders and needs them in order for them to do their job and for us to be successful as project managers. So it's a very important piece, and it's relatively new, so you might find people who are doing projects who aren't as attuned with finding, identifying their stakeholders, managing them, etc. So, acceptance and evaluation criteria definition. When we're trying to identify the stakeholders, there's some things we look. We brainstorm, we talk to people, we have that open discussion around a table or wherever. Brainstorming is second nature to me. I come from that kind of world. So, but you do need to, experiment. What helps you, and it's a blend of your personality and some techniques. Interviews. If you're, talk to people. Are you interested? Stakeholders have a vested interest in the success of the project by definition. So it's good to talk to people. Sometimes you'll discover that you're talking to one person, but they'll say, you needed to talk to Mary. She's important in this too. That kind of networking and connection is invaluable when trying to identify stakeholders. There may be an organizational model. You might have an org chart or something that you can look at and go, well, I'd better have these people because they're supposedly the bosses, or they use the product or something. But it's, don't assume that there are no org charts or there are no ways of finding who's reporting to whom. Sometimes process modeling can help you identify stakeholders. And how this works is, if you're modeling a process, you're saying that this person passes information to that person. Well, in that modeling, you see the interconnective nature of the business. And in seeing that, you can identify the who's that are around, because stakeholder identification is finding the who's. Who needs to be involved? Who needs to be notified? But process modeling is a different tactic of finding the information. And requirement workshops. I mean, if you're gathering requirements for a project, and you might invite 10 people, and you find out at that workshop that maybe 10 more needed to be invited, or maybe only 6 or 3. But those are kinds of things that you can do when you are, opening that communication up and trying to get people to focus on what you're doing. And in risk analysis, we identify stakeholders, because if you're doing a risk analysis, if you're trying to determine, and we'll get a whole lot more detail about risk analysis itself, but a lot of risk analysis, it starts very straightforward. What can go wrong? How likely is it? What will happen if it does go wrong? And that's just about it. There are some other techniques and things that we will talk about. But in that, just that simple little 3 questions, you can see that you could find out information. Someone needs to be called. Someone needs to be, you need to go over and talk with somebody. There's lots of things when you're dealing with the what ifs of risk that will help you identify stakeholders. Use cases, scenarios, any work that you're doing, you will naturally ask questions when you're developing use cases or scenarios, and you'll find others that may not have been identified. So always keep your eyes open. Always give people a chance to both say yes and to say no. Some people don't like to be stakeholders for particular projects because they feel overwhelmed by it. It can be difficult. And occasionally, surveys do work. I did a survey with number portability. And my job was to go around IT and get from the department heads exactly what they thought was going to happen at the first of the year 2000. Because that's with the timing. It was right after that number portability was supposed to come on board. Well, I ended up carrying a clipboard around and having to interview people, and they didn't really fill out their forms, but I interviewed them and took the surveys that way. And that was an effective way for me to learn who all these people were, what they did, and to get the information, because it was significant change that we did, and it had some catastrophic changes that were implemented because of it. But I also was able to easily identify who really wanted to be a part of it and who didn't, and that's part of the needs that you have, especially early in a project, is getting that kind of information. Now here's a stakeholder map. Note that high and you have low interest and low power down in this corner. You have high power and highly informed, opposite corners. And these are suggestions for how you would handle this when you would put somebody in this type of a matrix. And what I would do is I simply take Post-it notes. I put this on a bigger board and I just stick Post-it notes with their names on it. And I use that as a first go round to be able to understand, how do I, are these people mostly here, I'm just telling them, I'm just keeping them informed. They have an interest, but they're, they don't have a lot of power. Or am I having a lot of people that need a lot of hand-holding? Are they powerful, interested people that I need to really work hard? It just depends. It depends on your personality and their personality and how many of these are. But this is a simple tool. This is a back pocket tool that you can use and get some very good information fairly quickly. Now, this is a RACI chart. It's known as a RACI chart because of the acronym. The legend is down here. Responsible, R is responsible, A is accountable, C is consulted, I is informed. What this shows you is the resources across the top, the tasks down the side, and it notes what is their category of activity within those different tasks. For instance, Janice Jones is accountable for task A. Lance Salat is informed about task A. Don Q is responsible. Meredith is consulted. Now, you may ask, what's the difference between responsible and accountable? And it would be a good question. A responsible party is typically the person who's actually doing the work. So if you are actually driving the nail, you would be responsible for that. The person accountable is the person that gave you the nail and the hammer and said, drive it. That's how I think of it. So it's the person that, if I'm the project manager and I look at you and I see that that nail isn't driven, I would ask the accountable one, what happened? Not the responsible one. They can be used in different ways. And there's also different RAMs that can be used with different acronyms for different businesses. So this is just an example. Again, this is a tool. This is a tool. The other categories of consultant and informed is just what you'd think. Consultant means that they are asked about it. You know, if I am hanging a picture, I may be the one driving the nail, but I'm going to consult with my wife so I put it in the right place. So consultant is important. And I might inform my daughter because I'm hitting this nail on the wall she shares the other side of. And so I don't want her scared if I bang on the wall. And that's just a brief example. How this works in our business, I've known people that have used this incredibly well. They can be very detailed with it, and they can, it's a nice tool to be able to quickly understand who's doing what. And that's really what I see it used for in most cases that I've experienced. And I've heard very good things from some of my colleagues and some of my students that they've said, this one thing was the best tool I had. And I was like, you know, I'm talking for a week to them, and this is what they got out of it. So I think it's a nice tool. I think it's a good tool. So, planned stakeholder management. We've identified the stakeholders. We got a clue about who they are. Now we're planning. We use the project management plan. We use our stakeholder register. We use our enterprise environmental factors and our organizational process assets. Again, expert judgment is used as a tool. Meetings are used. Analytic techniques. So our typical stuff, it's very kind of standard stuff. Every time we go and are thinking about people, we're using expertise. We're using meetings, gathering people together. If there's an analytic part, we're going to use that too. Now the outputs here are our stakeholder management plan. Our stakeholder management plan is part of that project management plan. It could be a tab or a section within that. We also get other outputs like project documents get updated. I mean, that's typical of all these updates. Now we manage the stakeholder engagement. We've identified, we've planned, now we're managing. The inputs here are our stakeholder management plan, our communication management plan, any change log, organizational process assets. We use communication methods. This is about engaging and monitoring and managing the stakeholders. We want them engaged. We want them involved. So communication is the best way of seeking that involvement. We also use our interpersonal skills. I know I used to find out who was kind of the stakeholders in my building of different projects. And one of the ways I would do it is I would simply walk around and find the people and talk to them. And I'm a very gregarious person, so I could get a conversation going, and I would find out more about who they were, what they were doing, and how they might be involved in the project that I'm talking about. So use the things that you feel best with, but your interpersonal skills, your communication methods, those are great tools to use with the engagement of your stakeholders. Also, just general management skills are also, don't underestimate standards, kind of practice of calling a meeting or talking to them on the phone or something. Now, we have an issues log. It's noted here as an output to the engagement. Why would that be? Well, you want them engaged. Their engagement may mean that they see something wrong. An output for this engagement is reasonable to have an issues log so that any issues that are identified, big or small, can be tracked and resolution can be made. So it's here as an output. Also, any change requests. Just like with issues are the problems. Change requests are the requests for things to be changed, just like it says. So it makes sense that in our engagement that we would logically have change requests. We also have project management plan updates and project document updates. No surprises there. And you may affect your organizational process assets, and they may need to be updated. Because as you engage your stakeholders, it may be that organizations shift or need to be identified differently. So if you touch things and keep them all up to date. So examples of stakeholder engagement, daily involvement, and you can see the changes in that involvement with your different stakeholders. I find out sometimes that certain people like me to engage them one way, certain people another way, and that can evolve and change as the relationship does, as the project grows. Sometimes I am very much one-on-one talking to someone. Other times I find it better to communicate within a group. Sometimes email is better, sometimes texting. We have lots of different communication paths these days. But the scope and impact of changes in the stakeholders is very important. We need to have the communication requirements that are detailed. We need to know how to distribute the communication. What's the frequency? One of my problems, and it's a pet peeve of mine, I don't like people sending me everything urgent. If everything coming from someone is urgent, then nothing is urgent in my mind. So I need to understand the different personalities that exist and work with them. And I think that's important. But the more that you engage the stakeholders, the more they'll be involved and they'll have buy-in to the project. And these are important people. They're the ones that will report the success or failure of the project. So now, controlling stakeholder engagement. We have the inputs of the project management plan, issues log, work performance data, project documents. We use our information management systems, whatever we are using as an information management system or systems, we pull that together. Expert judgment again is used, as well as meetings. And typically when we're controlling stakeholder engagement, this is about wanting a sense of the performance we're getting. So there's a work performance information that we would be naturally gathering. We're trying to see how are we getting all the information we need? Are they answering all our questions, answering our surveys, whatever it is that you're doing specifically. Also, change requests. We get, when you're the output of this, we're going to get change requests. We have the project management plan is updated, and project documents get updated. Also, because of this controlling of this, the organizational process assets are at times updated. So those are your 4 processes in the project stakeholder management knowledge area. And I think they've done this a fairly straightforward way, which I like. And I think that is the direction that the PMBOK is going for the new version as well. Everything looks like they're trying to clean the language and get it consistent. And they've been doing that the last couple of versions. It's getting better and better and better. So be mindful of that. And here we have a key information review, or key terms. Stakeholder engagement. Understand what that is and the importance of it. The RACI. Realize that's a key tool in stakeholder engagement, in stakeholder management. The RAM. Also, RACI is just a special RAM. We have organizational modeling. Organizational modeling can be everything from org charts to more advanced charting and showing the relationships between the organization, and it can have different information like you've seen on a couple of the tools. So model, having some way of looking at your stakeholders and put them in different categories can help you with your communication. It can help you engage them. It can help you get information that is sometimes difficult and know who has it. Stakeholder analysis, doing that analysis so you know who to talk to about what. Issues logs coming up here first, but realize it's an important piece to this whole project management methodologies. And our stakeholder register. You just need to know who they are and how to get in touch with them, and any kind of device that could be used for that, whether it's Excel or in Word or whatever. It's important that you do it, not what it's done in.